Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that every step you take, from paying taxes to renewing an ID card to registering your business, passes through one invisible gatekeeper. A system you never voted for, a company you've never owned shares in, yet it controls the pulse of an entire nation's digital life. That's Irembo.
The last 4 years has focused on using technology,
The silent empire that has become Rwanda's single most important digital infrastructure. A name that every citizen knows, yet few truly understand. How did it rise? Who built it? And why does it feel less like a business and more like an unelected government within a government? Clement Uwajeneza has built one of the most influential and valuable tech platforms in East Africa. But the story of what's going on behind the scenes is crazy, from navigating government bureaucracy to completely reshaping how citizens access public services. This video is the insane history of Irembo, but it's also a journey through the past, present, and future of digital government. And this is a story that affects us all. Clement Uwajeneza studied computer science and business, but he dropped out of traditional paths to work on his own vision. It was called Irembo, and it was a platform that allowed citizens to access government services online. However, since Clement started Irembo before Rwanda's digital infrastructure was fully ready, this proved to be a challenge. But Clement worked tirelessly on his platform, often skipping sleep and personal comfort. He worked so hard and was so consumed by the project that it affected his health. Then, in the early 2010s, Clement Uwajeneza enrolled in several entrepreneurship and tech incubation programs, which were essentially boot camps for startups and digital innovators. It was during these programs that Clement attracted the attention of some of Rwanda's most experienced tech mentors and investors. One of these mentors had extensive experience in tech, government systems, and business development, and took Clement under his wing. The two quickly developed a strong working relationship, with the mentor guiding Clement on how to scale digital platforms and navigate both the private and public sectors. However, his mentor also observed something curious about Clement. He said, "Clement is extremely good at creating influence and building power. You could put him in a completely new environment, and in 5 years, he'd be the leader of the local ecosystem." Interestingly, before long, Clement ended up becoming the central figure behind Irembo's expansion and influence. This meant that, at just 30 years old, Clement Uwajeneza was now leading Rwanda's most ambitious digital transformation project, which allowed him to build relationships with key government officials, entrepreneurs, and tech leaders. Clement became extremely well connected, and his reputation in East Africa's tech world grew massive.
Clement soon began doing more public talks, and one of his favorite topics to discuss was the potential of digital government and technology to transform societies. In the early years, Clement was confronted with enormous hurdles. He was concerned about the lack of infrastructure and policy support for digital services, which he felt could halt the platform's growth. At this point, other tech hubs and startups were growing fast, with plenty of funding and talent. And yet when Clement approached some established institutions, many didn't seem all that worried about digital disruption. He asked them how they could be sure traditional systems wouldn't fail millions of citizens, but most dismissed it completely, saying Clement was being overly ambitious. But Clement realized that Rwanda's digital services sector was dominated by a few large players, and that many key decisions were being made without considering the needs of ordinary citizens. Clement realized that if Irembo was to succeed, he couldn't rely on existing institutions. Just one system controlling so many services, and no one seems to care about modernization. So Clement desperately felt he needed to rally the right team, and that would lead him to form partnerships with key technologists, government insiders, and innovators who shared his vision. In 2014, a group of 10 influential people in Rwanda's tech and government space met for a strategy session. Clement Uwajeneza was there. So was his co-founder and technical lead, who would be influential in building the platform, and also several advisors who were respected in tech and public service. At that session, they all talked very seriously about digitizing public services and the potential consequences of getting it wrong. And they discussed how they could build a platform together that would truly transform Rwanda's service delivery. Clement said he would dedicate his personal savings and secure government support. And so they figured with Clement's vision, his co-founder's technical expertise, and the advisor's operational and strategic skills, they would have the dream team. And thus, Irembo began its journey in 2015 as a mission-driven organization. The reason was that they felt having a profit-only focus with a platform that handles critical public services could be very dangerous. Instead, it should be built for the good of citizens. What's the furthest thing from slow, bureaucratic services? A platform that is fully transparent and accessible, because traditional systems were closed and opaque. That's why the name Irembo reflects openness and service for all. We don't want this to be just another profit-driven system that ignores people. In their own words, Irembo's objective was to digitize government services safely and efficiently for the benefit of the public. And they would make the platform accessible to all citizens instead of keeping it exclusive for private gain. However, very soon, that vision would face massive challenges. When Irembo began in 2014, it did not look like a world-changing platform. They didn't even have an office. It was just a small group working from Clement's apartment. We're sitting essentially on the couch, kitchen counter, and on a bed. That's where work is getting done. However, they had support from key government and private partners, which meant they could attract talented engineers and advisors very quickly. And so they began by just experimenting. Unfortunately, they didn't really have a clear roadmap. They spent a lot of their time testing different ways to digitize government services efficiently. They figured if they could streamline even one service, it could scale to dozens more. Clement was juggling multiple responsibilities. He was still building relationships and shaping policy, while the co-founder and advisors handled operations and technical development. But what the whole team did have was a shared vision of creating a platform that could revolutionize public service delivery. There are different ways to define success, but it often meant services that could match or surpass the efficiency of traditional in-person methods. But here's the key. Irembo needed to be adaptive, able to handle new services it wasn't originally designed for. Which is why some observers say, the first fully functional digital government platform is the last innovation citizens will ever need. Because if a system like Irembo works, it can scale, evolve, and continuously improve without the limitations of traditional bureaucracy. Even in the very early days, the Irembo team were discussing how they wanted to completely change the way citizens interacted with government. This platform will solve problems we have today: long queues, corruption, inefficiency. But it could also introduce new challenges: digital literacy gaps, cybersecurity threats, automation failures. Many of the Irembo team shared a similar feeling. What they were building had the potential to be the greatest advancement in citizen services ever, but they also recognized that mismanagement could create serious risks. It's not going to actively harm citizens, but if misused or poorly implemented, it could be too powerful. A good analogy is the way humans manage complex infrastructure. We don't intend harm, but when building a major highway, we don't ask every single citizen for permission. The cynical explanation was that the Irembo team talked about transforming governance because it helped attract attention, partnerships, and funding. But it does seem most of them genuinely believed what they were saying about the potential impact of this platform, and they weren't the only ones. Other leaders in technology and government recognized that whoever succeeded in digitalizing public services effectively could reshape society. The digital transformer. A small engineering team at Irembo developed a system architecture that radically changed how government services could be automated. Unlike previous digital platforms that needed highly structured forms for each service, which required manual input for every single workflow, Irembo's new system could take in diverse, messy data from multiple agencies and essentially learn how to process it automatically. And it works surprisingly well. What's interesting is that it was the engineers at Irembo, not anyone else in Rwanda, who made this breakthrough. But Irembo had become so small at the time that they moved cautiously. So even though they developed this powerful new automation system before most competitors, they didn't immediately deploy it for every service. They worried it could produce errors that might affect citizens and raise regulatory scrutiny. Most crucially, they knew a major mistake could undermine trust in digital government services. In hindsight, moving cautiously was both a blessing and a limitation. It allowed the platform to stabilize before scaling, but it also gave room for competitors and innovators to notice the potential of what Irembo was building. Clement Uwajeneza read early tests of the system and immediately saw its potential. As a result, Irembo became one of the first organizations in Rwanda to seriously start expanding digital services across multiple ministries. The new platform could handle far more data and process citizen requests much faster. Most importantly, it could now handle almost any government service, meaning the system was far more general and flexible than any previous approach. So thanks to this architecture, Irembo suddenly started making huge progress very quickly. By 2017, Rwanda had sufficient internet penetration, digitized records, and growing technical expertise. All government data could now be integrated into Irembo's system as training and operational input. Essentially, everything the government had ever recorded digitally could now be fed into Irembo's platform, enabling automation and intelligent service management. It's been described as a black box, as we don't fully understand all the decision-making behind the scenes. We just input citizen requests and receive output. But all of this meant that instead of platforms that could only manage one service at a time, Irembo's new system became extremely broad and general. It had essentially been trained on all available government workflows, so it could process almost anything. However, this method of integrating data from multiple ministries raises obvious privacy and regulatory concerns. But the Rwandan tech ethos, inspired by speed and efficiency, has often leaned toward action first, clarification later. Irembo knew that if they spent too much time asking every agency for permission, there would be long delays. So Clement and his team just went ahead and implemented it. And it worked so well that by the time Irembo launched its fully integrated digital platform for government services, Clement Uwajeneza and his team started to become concerned. They feared what they were building was so powerful that if it was freely shared or copied by other organizations, in the wrong hands, this could lead to misuse of sensitive citizen data. So Irembo announced, "Due to our concerns about misuse of the platform, we will carefully control access to certain advanced features." This actually helped generate a huge amount of publicity and hype for them. For example, local tech media published articles calling it Rwanda's government platform that's too powerful to share freely. Irembo also didn't fully disclose all the sources of its integrated data. It started to become clear that Irembo maybe didn't want to be completely open after all. The turning point. Irembo was born with a promise, a gateway to the future. It would unite government and citizen in a single click. It would prove to the world that Rwanda was not just recovering, it was leading, and for a while it worked. Citizens marveled as services that once took weeks now took hours. Passports, driving licenses, land titles, all just a few keystrokes away. Foreign investors applauded. The world whispered, Maybe Rwanda has cracked the code. But with progress came shadows, because when you digitize power, you also centralize it. Every request, every application, every movement of a citizen, flowing through one portal, one company, one vision. Who truly owned this future? Was it the state? Was it Clement? Or was Irembo becoming something larger, a private gatekeeper of public life? Inside boardrooms, tensions grew. Some called Clement a pioneer, others called him reckless. And in Kigali, whispers started, how much control should one man have over the state's digital bloodline? The truth is, Irembo was never just about convenience. It was about power. Power over identity. Power over access. Power over the relationship between citizen and state. And in Rwanda, power is never left unattended. Soon, Irembo's story took a darker turn. Clement was gradually pushed aside, his role diminished. Official statements called it a transition, but to many who watched closely, it looked more like a quiet takeover. The state wanted the machine back, but here's the twist. Even as its founder lost control, Irembo itself refused to die. The system was about power. It is about the fragile line between progress and control. And in the end, Irembo may not just be Rwanda's digital gateway, it may be its digital mirror, reflecting not just the future the nation dreams of, but the compromises it has already made. Every empire has its walls, every nation has its gates, and in Rwanda the gate has a name: Irembo.